Okay, welcome back. Today we're continuing our BCBA exam review, where I'm going through a full BCBA exam, question by question, and breaking down each question, how I think you should think about it when you're taking your actual exam. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Keep working hard. Any questions you have, please email me or leave a comment below. Other than that, let's get right into our questions. We're on 31. A manager of a customer support center wants to increase the total amount of phone calls his employees take in a week. He will record the number of calls answered each day. If he wanted to display the increase in the total number of calls on a graph, what would be the best method for displaying this data? All right, so think about it for a second. What is our purpose for graphing the data? Do we want to see correlation between an X and a Y variable? Do we want to see ecological correlations? What are we looking for? We want to see the increase in total number of calls, okay? So we want to see on Monday, we had a total of 20 calls. By Tuesday, we had a total of 35 calls. By Wednesday, 45, Thursday, 50, and Friday, 60. So an ever-increasing number of calls. What graph continuously goes up and always increases no matter what? Is it a scatter plot? No, scatter plot would be if we were looking for an association between an X and a Y variable, such as a behavior in a time or a behavior in a setting. A pie chart doesn't fit this at all, okay? A pie chart is going to give us a breakout of data, typically in percentages, right? That's not going to help us here. Cumulative record. What is a cumulative record? Cumulative record, of course, is a graph that continues to increase indefinitely. It never decreases. So if we want to see our total number go up on a graph and only go up, we're going to use a cumulative record. So as we continue to record calls, our cumulative record continues to increase, and we can see that total number grow. Histogram, of course, is going to be similar to a pie chart in the fact that we're going to break out data, okay? We're not trying to break out data. We have one thing we're looking for, which is a total number. And that total number on a cumulative record will always increase. If the manager wants to see that total number and its increase, he would use C, a cumulative record. 32. Your 15-year-old client is having trouble working with his group on a project at school. You create an intervention that provides your client with 2 hours of Netflix time if he contributes to the group assignment, or 30 minutes of Netflix time if he completes his part of the assignment independently. What best describes this reinforcement schedule? So remember, we have 7 complex reinforcement schedules, okay? So this is a complex reinforcement schedule question. In the question, what are you granting your client? Well, you're granting your client choice, right? They have a choice to work with the group and get a bigger reinforcement, or they can work by themselves and get a smaller reinforcement, okay? So this is similar to matching law. What reinforcement schedule do we have that uses choice in it? Is it A, multiple? Multiple and mixed, right? Remember, are 2 schedules that alternate typically at random, okay? So they're going to function randomly, right? The difference is multiple has an SD to signal what reinforcement schedule is available. Mixed doesn't. Either way, both of those schedules are operating independently, okay, but in a random fashion. Here, these are 2 separate reinforcement schedules, okay, where our client has a choice. B, concurrent, is our reinforcement schedule that offers choice. You can choose A and get this reinforcement for this response, or you can choose B and get this reinforcement for this response. Okay, that's what's happening here. This is a concurrent schedule. Chained, of course, is a sequence of reinforcement where the consequence of the previous step is the SD for the next step. Okay, so these SDs happen in order in a chain, right? The sister to chained is tandem. We're not looking at a chain schedule here. we're looking at two concurrent reinforcement schedules operating, okay, through choice. 33, each night you like to enjoy a cup of tea before bed. You grab your electric kettle, take off the top, put water into it, and then set it on the boiler to 212 degrees. After 5 minutes, the water is ready and the kettle beeps and you pour the water over the tea. The beep represents what? Okay, so we've got a SDMO question, okay, here. And the question is asking about the beep. So when you've got a long question or a question with a lot of information, remember it's important to understand what the question is asking. You have a ton of time on the BCBA exam. Use it wisely. Don't rush, okay? I don't think I've ever met anyone who ran out of time on the exam, okay? You get a long time. So make sure you know what they're asking. They are asking about the beep, right? So let's find the beep, right? You grab the kettle, set the boiler. After 5 minutes, the water's ready. The kettle beeps, okay? What happens immediately after the kettle beeping? You pour the water. So the kettle beeping is some sort of antecedent for what, right? It's an antecedent to you pouring the water, okay? So C, the antecedent to drinking the tea. No, that's pouring the water is the antecedent to drinking the tea. Beeping is not the consequence for grabbing the kettle, right? Grabbing the kettle was up here. So it's either going to be the MO for pouring water over the tea or the SD. Is the kettle beeping increasing the value of pouring the water, okay? Or is it signaling there's reinforcement available for pouring the water? The value is already there for pouring the water. The motivation is already there. You want to pour the water to make your tea, okay? But until the kettle beeps, right, you know there's no reinforcement available. And that's the key. The kettle beeping is the SD. It's signaling reinforcement is now available for pouring the water over the tea. So the beep represents the SD in this scenario. 34, Jonah conducts 3 hour-long observations for his client engaging in self-injurious behavior. The behavior happened 16 times, 34 times, and 26 times in respect to each session. Each response lasted 1 to 2 seconds. The average duration was 1.2 seconds. If Jonah wanted to reduce this behavior, what would be the best dimension to measure? All right, so self-injurious behavior, obviously something we want to address, okay? We know the behavior happens 16 times the first session, 34 times, and then 26 times, okay? So if we want to reduce it, what dimension do we want to measure? Do we want to measure latency? Well, we have no clear SD in this scenario, okay? Even if we did, the time between the SD and the behavior happening isn't necessarily relevant, right? Because it's happening so much in this hour-long observation, okay, that it doesn't really matter how long it takes from the SD to the time of the behavior, okay? We can assume it's fairly short, okay? So the latency is not going to really help us in targeting reduction. What about magnitude? Again, magnitude is going to tell us the intensity, right? That, again, is not going to help us. Does it matter if the self-injurious behavior is extremely harmful, mildly harmful? Not necessarily. Either way, we want to reduce it, right? So the magnitude is only going to tell us how intense it is. It's not going to tell us about reducing the behavior. That leaves us with duration and rate. We know our duration was 1.2 seconds, okay? You can only go so much lower with your duration, okay? It's a very quick and rapid response, right? But it's happening a lot, okay? So reducing the duration doesn't make a ton of sense because the durations are already very low. The frequency is extremely high though, right? 16 times, 34 times, 26 times. If we can reduce the frequency, okay, we can therefore reduce the behavior. The duration's already very low. So targeting the frequency makes more sense. Therefore, what is the best dimension to measure? Well, let's measure rate. We know what happens 16 times per hour, 34 times per hour, 26 times per hour. We would take an average, and then we would try to reduce that average. Remember, rate is frequency over time. Whenever you're targeting a behavior for decrease, pick the best measurement, okay, that's going to give you the best data in regards to reducing the behavior. Again, duration, you can only go so much lower than 1.2 seconds, but it's happening so often, okay, that we can actually really target the frequency. So we want to reduce the behavior. We are going to pick rate. You've been working with your client on getting dressed for 1 month. They previously demonstrated they were able to dress independently, but the behavior is inconsistent. Yesterday, the client's mom became impatient and assisted the client in putting their shirt on. Now, the client won't put their shirt on unless someone helps. What answer best demonstrates this scenario? So hopefully you already have an idea of what's going on in this question, right? What happened to the client? Well, they became prompt dependent, right? We had worked so hard on getting them independent. Parent jumps in, put their shirt on for them. Now the client needs that prompt to put their shirt. They need help. Okay, they become prompt dependent. So what answer best demonstrates the scenario? Let's see if we can find the answer choice we're looking for. A, the client should have been taught to use their words to ask for help. Well, we don't know anything about the client's communication skills. Okay, we do know they could dress independently. Therefore, asking for help to dress isn't really the best option here because we know they can do it. Okay, so A is out. B, the client should be fired for disrupting your intervention. Of course not. That's way too harsh, right? We're not going to fire a client for being a mom, essentially, right? So B is too harsh. C, there we go. The client developed a prompt dependency. Absolutely, that's what we want. What about D, the task chain was poorly designed? No, because we were able to teach them, right? They did it independently, but then the mom jumped in and a prompt dependency was developed. When you're practicing and when you're learning and when you're studying, read the question and try to answer the question before you see the answer choices, okay? Go as slow as you need to get every question correct. This question we answered before we got to the answer choices. Not every question on the exam is going to be the hardest question you've ever seen, okay? Some are going to be very easy. If they're easy, don't overthink them. Just answer them to the best of your ability. Answer them with your best answer. 36, your client wants to decrease the time they spend in detention. You determine that your client typically receives detention for talking out in class. You decide to compare 2 procedures to reduce talking out in class: differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors with a punishment procedure, and differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors without a punishment procedure. The 2 interventions were both effective, but your client preferred the punishment procedure. How should you proceed in choosing an intervention? All right, long question, a lot of information, okay? What is the question asking? The question is asking how we should proceed based on our knowledge of what? Well, we know the 2 interventions were effective, but our client preferred the punishment procedure. That's the important part of this question, okay? All the other stuff is leading up to this information. So how do we proceed knowing our interventions were effective, but our client preferred the punishment procedure? What do we do? A, use the differential reinforcement intervention without punishment. You should always avoid punishment. Be very careful here, right? Always is a very strong word. Do we always avoid punishment? Of course not. There are times we will use punishment. Always avoiding punishment is way too strong, okay? Additionally, the intervention worked with punishment, okay? So always avoiding punishment just because there's another intervention without punishment isn't correct, okay? You should try to use no punishment when possible, but you shouldn't always avoid it. What about B? Use differential reinforcement intervention with punishment. You should respect your client's input on programming. Absolutely. If your client believes that the punishment procedure is better for them, you should respect that. Both interventions are effective, both work. Your client wants the punishment procedure, do the punishment procedure. Respect the wishes, maintain their dignity, okay? Have them involved in treatment planning. B is very good. Always read all your answer choices. C, use the intervention that you think is better. The client's opinion does not matter in this scenario. Absolutely wrong. The client's opinion does matter in treatment planning. It's their life. D, consult the client's parents for the final decision. No, you don't. That is not necessary. Okay, you've already designed these interventions. You're way past that part. Okay, both work. You have A or B. The client prefers B. Let's go with the one with punishment. 37. Lisa has been dating Mark for 6 months. They have a great relationship, but Lisa does not like how long it takes for Mark to respond to her text messages. Sometimes Mark will go hours without responding to a text. The time it takes for Mark to respond after receiving a text is considered a type of what? All right. So what do we know about the time between Mark responding to a text? Okay. This is some sort of measurement question, right? We're looking for what? Okay. So the text is what in the scenario? The text is the SD. Okay. Lisa thinks it takes too long between the SD and the response. What is the time between the SD and the response? Latency, right? But we go to our answer choices, and latency is not an option. Okay, so what do? We can eliminate duration. Duration is out, of course. Repeatability is out as well. That leaves us with temporal extent and temporal locus. Is latency temporal extent or is latency temporal locus? Well, duration is temporal extent, right? So it has to be temporal locus. Enter response time and latency are both temporal locus, okay? The time it takes for Mark to respond after receiving a text is considered a type of B, temporal locus. You got to know all of this, right? You have to know that. 38, punishment can be either socially mediated or automatic. Which of the following is the best example of automatic punishment? What's the difference between socially mediated and automatic? Automatic, there's one person involved. Socially mediated, there's the learner and another person or persons involved. We're looking for the example of automatic punishment. We need the example where only one person is involved. That is your giveaway. When you're going through your answer choices, only pick the scenario with one person, okay? Delivering the consequence. A, you typically order the salmon roll from your local sushi place, but they are out of the salmon. You order the tuna instead, okay? Can you order tuna to yourself? No, right? There's going to be some sort of transaction, right? Whether you do it online, whether you do it in the restaurant, there's going to be some sort of transaction where you're relying on somebody else to give you the tuna. This is not automatic, okay? And we're looking for automatic punishment, right? You're simply being put on extinction, okay? There's no salmon roll, so your reinforcement's not available, right? You order tuna instead, okay? So it's socially and it's not punishment. B, your little brothers are constantly fighting. Now when they fight, you take away their Xbox. They no longer fight when you are around. This is an example of punishment, but how many people are involved? 3, okay? 3 or more, right? We don't know little brothers, how many little brothers there are, but point being, there's more than one person involved. This is socially mediated. C, you buy a brand new sweatshirt from a popular online store. When it arrives, you wear it for a day, but it is too tight and itchy. You no longer wear the sweatshirt. All right, so what is delivering the consequence here? Well, the sweatshirt, right? So there's only one person involved. You no longer wear the sweatshirt, so it's punishment, okay? This is an example of automatic punishment, okay? The sweatshirt's already arrived. The sweatshirt is the one delivering the consequence. All right, so C is our answer. Read D. It usually takes you 45 minutes to get to work. Today, you try a new route and turn down a different street. You get to work 20 minutes faster. Now always take that route. No, you got reinforced, right? You took a different route. That route was faster. You always take that route now. The only example of automatic and punishment is C. You buy the sweatshirt. When you put the sweatshirt on, okay, too tight and itchy, sweatshirt, deliver the consequence. You no longer wear sweatshirt. You're hired to consult for a kindergarten class at a private academy. The class has 25 students in it and one teacher. The teacher wants to record on-task behavior for each student in the class during their 30-minute work interval. The behavior analyst recommends measuring duration for each student during that interval. A month later, the teacher complains that the intervention is unrealistic. What change should the behavior analyst make? All right, a lot going on here. The teacher believes the intervention is unrealistic. There's some sort of change happening. What is the intervention? Well, the analyst wants this teacher to measure duration for every student in the class. She has 25 students. How will she be able to do that? Okay. It's going to be very challenging. So unsurprisingly, the teacher says it's unrealistic. What kind of measurement do we have for these scenarios? When you have multiple students, limited time, limited resources, this is when discontinuous measurement comes into play, right? Our interval recording and time sampling. Okay, so keep that in mind. What change should the behavior analyst make? Retrain the teacher on duration data. Well, the training is not the issue here. The issue is the teacher is unable to record duration data for 25 students at a time. Okay, A is out. B, switch the measurement to frequency. Well, that's just going to give us the same issue, right, of this, because that's continuous. In addition, recording on-task behavior using frequency doesn't make a whole lot of sense, okay? B is out. C, switch the measurement to time sampling. Yeah, that seems like a good alternative, right? If we get to time sampling, then the teacher can use maybe a play check, right, where she's recording the behavior of the whole class all at once. C is pretty good. What about D? Have the teacher take data on one child per day. Well, that's going to take a long time to collect all that data. By the time we get that data, the school year is going to be over. Again, that is also unrealistic. The best possible change will be switching to a discontinuous measurement procedure, such as time sampling. And then 40, Greta is the clinical director for a large ABA corporation. Greta is in charge of creating ongoing training for RBTs on the staff. Greta is specific in her descriptions of RBT requirements. She uses both modeling and performance-based training to teach RBTs the interventions. The last thing she does is monitor RBT performance. What is Greta missing in her system? This is a supervision question, a training question, right? Remember, training should be done using ABA principles. So what did Greta do? Well, Greta did what she was supposed to do, right? She set specific goals and descriptions. She modeled and trained the RBTs. She monitored RBTs for performance. What is missing? What comes after performance? What do we need to do? What happens when they're doing the right thing? What do we need to do? What happens when they're doing the wrong thing? What do we need to do? We need to deliver a consequence, some sort of feedback, maybe some reinforcement, maybe a punisher, something to inform the RBT how their performance is after you monitor, right? That's our answer. A is our answer. Read all your answer choices. Monetary rewards for positive staff performance. Not necessarily. You don't absolutely have to have monetary rewards. You just need consequences to give feedback on their performance. C, Greta should train before she specifies what RBTs are required to do. No, she had the right order. How can you train without the RBTs knowing what they're supposed to do? And then D, there's a conflict of interest in Greta training her RBTs. No, Greta is totally allowed to train these RBTs. So Greta is missing a consequence following RBT performance. Okay, I hope you enjoyed these questions. We'll be back next week with more. We're finishing up our exam, so soon you'll be able to buy the practice exam and the study guide together. Be on the lookout for that. Meanwhile, any questions you have, leave them below or email me. I'm happy to help. Keep studying hard, and I'll see you soon.